Well, it is good seeing everyone again. Thank you very much for joining us. And so, hey, every month at least, Mandeep and I see Marissa is now joining. It is an honor for us to be here and to really be able to share some of our thoughts. And today, you're going to hear from just a wonderful, wonderful guest speaker who I just love. Her name is Deb Knupp. I have known Deb for about 6 or 7 years. I think she is probably one of the best speakers, teachers, business leaders that I know of. And so as a result, I can't wait for you here. The theme that we're going to go with today is embracing change. And Marissa, I'm seeing you here as you are. Marissa, I'm getting to know your staff and they are a delight. And so we're going to have Deb speak for about 40 minutes. And then we're going to spend the last 20 minutes just doing some Q&A, answering questions. And so, Willie, I may just ask your help as people are asking questions, especially if I'm not able to understand it, because if you want to speak in Bahasa, please, Willie will be able to be here to translate to both me and Deb as well, too. Mandeep, Marissa, did you want to share any words before we begin?
I think I've spoken a lot last time, so let Miss Marissa speak about it. And then, and let me just add one thing, Tommy. If you can see some force or some kind of a spark in me, now that is the real force behind. She's the real force that you can see that coming out. So I think let Ibu Marissa do the honors. I think Ibu, over to you.
Yeah, and thank you, Tommy. Thank you, Deb. It's such a pleasure to have you be able to present to the rest of our team. So, and Mandeep has very generously, kind of given me a little bit of intro, but truly I'm the one who's motivated by my team. I think the way that they work and the way that they are so committed to what they do really, truly inspires me to get up every day. And especially during this past year of a pandemic where it's been a tough year in many ways, professionally, personally, for so many people. But still that commitment to really delivering and serving our customers and working together as a team, I think that has it's just been really humbling. And it's just been very, very also encouraging to see how the team has really come together during this past year. So I am so proud of all of my colleagues and the team that I'm a part of at the Busana Group, and we have different business units represented here. And so anyhow, we're just really honored and pleased to have you speak, Deb, and thank you, Tommy, for being such a champion and organizing everything.
Always. Hey, when Marissa and I were first talking about it, both her and then she introduced Mandeep, how can we bring alongside different speakers to continue to encourage you on your job? How do we continue to really be able to challenge and really be able to equip you to do your job better, but also for you to continue to grow as leaders as well too? There is no one. Have you ever in life ever met somebody who is just makes a difference in your life, who teaches you a lot of different things, and who you meet just makes your growth as a leader that much better? And I see that in Deb Knupp. Let me read to you her bio. Deb has 30 years experience in business development. She has worked with leaders in the legal, manufacturing, accounting, financial services. The one thing that she always teaches is how leading and selling is an act of service through authentic relationships and always focus on other-centered problem solving. She has started companies such as Growth Play. She now also has founded Akina, and she does a lot of stuff in training legal professionals currently right now, as well as other companies in the area of business development. I am one of her biggest fans. I love her dearly, and we've known each other for many years. And Deb, not only are we near neighbors, but at the same time, I learn from you all the time. So welcome to you, my friend.
Well, thank you. Well, what a generous way to start. Well, first of all, good morning. And what a great way to end our day here in Chicagoland. It is a real honor to be a part of your conversation and to have an opportunity to share with you some insights regarding this conversation of embracing change. I am confident there's not one of us in any form or fashion that could have predicted the amount of disruption that our world has experienced for the better part of 15 months. And as we are beginning to see new ways of the world operating, the way that businesses are returning to offices and returning to facilities, and as we begin to see the opening up of new customer opportunities, people are beginning to see and put a hopeful focus towards growth. My hope is today that this conversation will encourage you, that you will learn new skills, and that you will affirm many of the things that you're already doing as leaders that help you be very successful in leading your teams and in working with your customers. So with that, I will share my screen and introduce this morning's conversation is in the conversation of embracing change. Now, as Tommy has been so generous to introduce you all to me, I can say that it has been such a privilege to observe the various areas of the marketplace, whether it is in professional services or whether it's been working in business to business organizations. So I often have the privilege of being with entrepreneurial startups all the way to very large and publicly traded organizations. And when I think about the area of change, whether we're looking at change as leaders, whether we're looking at change in the context of our sales or our client or customer experience, or whether or not we're looking at change when it comes to motivating and developing people, our capacity as leaders to both embrace change and lead change is a critical success factor to being the very best leader and worker that we can be. So let's take an inventory as to where we are in our present day, in our world, and in our personal lives. We've had no shortage of struggles and challenges as it relates to COVID-19. And as we begin to see the tremendous disruption and toll that this has taken on our businesses, on our families, and on our communities at large, we know firsthand that in the midst of turmoil and change, sometimes the thing that plagues us are fear. Human beings by nature have embedded fears when it comes to engaging and interacting at work and at home. And when we're under tremendous stress, like we all have been in the last 15 months, these fears have a way of informing the actions or choices that we may make, and these fears also inform our inaction. As you begin to look across these examples, I want you to think about your experiences in communicating with your customers. I want you to think about your experiences in engaging with your frontline workforce. I want you to think about all of the areas in interacting with your suppliers, working with your community, working with your local government and local organizations. Think about how many people have been either really distressed, operating out of the fear of failure, the fear of being wrong, the fear of looking bad, or think about how many people have simply pulled back, have isolated, are not responding to email, are not returning calls as they fear being uncomfortable or they fear rejection. So as we think about distress and we think about change, the first thing we need to remember is that we collectively as human beings share an experience under distress that includes all of these fears. And when these fears are overplayed, sometimes we begin to tell ourselves in the midst of change that we need things at a much higher level than are actually true in more stable times. So as we think about the distress and we think about how human beings react and respond in fear, I want us to begin to think about what does the human response look like in the midst of change? Well, here are some truths that may surprise you. Number one, in the absence of having clear information, as human beings, we make stuff up. Now, let me translate this for a moment. When we don't have all the information, we allow our minds to swirl, to get afraid, to be distressed, and we often think of the worst case scenario. So when we think about change, if we are not engaging in accurate and updated information, sometimes our minds are some of the biggest obstacles to our ability to embrace change. Secondly, when it comes to information, we need to understand that by giving information early that is accurate, even if it may be upsetting, it is far preferred to information that is delayed, surprising, and that produces the feelings of anger. So I want you to think about maybe a customer situation. Imagine that you know there's going to be a disruption with a delivery time. And imagine, as you know, that this delivery date is not going to be met, with each day that gets closer and closer to the deadline, we are increasing the odds that when the customer learns that they're not receiving an order or they're not receiving a service, that delay in that information will not only surprise your customer, but in that surprise, it produces a great deal of anger. Now I want you to think of that same situation. You know, as you look ahead in your forecast or in your planning or in your project teams, and we know that a delivery date or a service date is going to be missed. If we communicate that information, as upsetting as it may be, if we give this early and we're honest and transparent in the information, yes, our customers may be upset, but they won't be angry. And here's why this is important when we think about the human response to change. When a human being is angry, the feeling of anger lasts so much longer than the feeling of being upset. And so when we give information with enough lead time, a person will get over being upset and have an ability to adjust their mindset to accept the change. You see, when we're upset, it registers in our brain in a very temporary area. Yet when we're surprised and we are angry, anger will take space in our brain in an area which is more permanent. In fact, when we surprise people and we make them angry, they may be more likely to be offended, to feel betrayed, and to have a long-lasting memory of this mistake. If we communicate early, the human response to change is far more swift and far more effective. Now, sometimes you may hear that human beings resist change. And the truth is, human beings actually don't resist change. In fact, human beings are made to move in the space of change. I mean, think about how we've grown and evolved and how many changes we've all experienced in the growth of our career. Think about the changes we've experienced in our education. Think about the changes we may have experienced as we've aged. Think about how many changes we've experienced when we've gotten married or had children or have been working with elderly parents. Our human condition actually embraces change. We embrace change when we know that it's important to grow and to learn. The thing is, though, human beings do resist being changed. And the difference between embracing change and having a human being feel like they're being changed, controlled, directed, surprised, angered, these are conditions that can be avoided when we apply best practices and we apply the disciplines of knowing how to embrace change and to lead change very effectively. Now let's think for a moment around changes that you may be experiencing right now. Think about the areas of opportunity that may be disrupted, but may also be very exciting. Think about your roles as leaders. Some of you have formal roles of leadership. In your job position, in your work, you supervise people, you supervise projects, you supervise departments. Many of us have formal roles of leadership. I also want you to think about your informal roles of leadership. Think about the leadership roles you may have in your community, in your volunteer organizations, in your families, in your hobbies, in your sports teams. You see, when it comes to leadership and when it comes to change, We have opportunities both formally and informally all throughout our life. So as we move into this next section of the workshop, this is our opportunity to think about where are changes happening that as leaders, formally and informally, where do we need to embrace change and recognize that as a leader, we have a great privilege to be role models and to be very effective in helping others get from where they are to where they need to be in the midst of disruption and change. So let's begin with a definition of what is leadership. And as I just stated, I think a good way of thinking about our leadership roles is our capacity, our focus, our ability as leaders to move ourselves and a group of people from wherever we are right now into a place in the future where we need to be. Think about leadership as an ability to get things done. And usually leaders who have the ability to get things done are most effective when they lead through and with the people that are around them. Leadership, when it works well, is an influence type of activity. Leadership is not about arm twisting. It's not about forcing. It's not about doing change to people. It's not about coercion. And leadership is about creating environments where the people all around you are excited to follow. And they follow you because they see where you're going and why you're going there. And it makes them want to follow you, not simply because they have to follow you because of your position of authority. When we think about embracing change and we think about leadership, these are essential ingredients in order to get results and to get results with integrity, with a sense of honor, and in a way where human beings can flourish. Now, when I think about leadership, sometimes I'm reminded of experiences regarding styles of leadership. And there are essentially two major ways to think about leadership style. Now, on the left-hand side, you see the leadership style called command. Now, command is a heavy-handed leadership style. Command is telling people what they need to do without other reasons except because you said so. Command is also leaves very little room for creativity because it's a style of leadership that says to people, I say when you do things and I say how you do things. This command style can really keep people from being creative, from being problem solvers, and from engaging in a more productive way. Sometimes we hear command in the form of command and control, and it's that control that often human beings are resisting. Command styles of leadership also rely often on the perception or the real threat. So it's do what I say or else. Command styles of leadership are also incredibly defensive and incredibly protective, which means it's all about holding on to things. It's a mindset of scarcity, and command styles of leadership have a way of engaging, which is playing the game, not to lose. Playing the game in order to protect and to save and to hold on tightly so that we are in a position not to lose the game as a whole. Now, I want us to contrast this with the style of leadership known as influence. And influence has alternatives that not only allow us to engage people, but it creates conditions where people will want to change and they'll want to follow. So instead of do it because I said so, influence says do it because it's the right thing. And you are a type of person who likes to do the right things. It's believing the best in people. It's also, perhaps as leaders, you may say when, and you create capacity or opportunities for people to say how. You invite creativity when you focus on an influence style of leadership. You give room for other people to offer ideas and input. Influence is not a command and control style. It's about collaboration and it's about connection. Influence styles of leadership have a way of bringing people together where the sum of the people, the total number of people, have a way of producing benefits or results in ways that individuals simply can't. Influence style of leadership is not a threatening style. It's a possibility or a creativity or an innovation style. So instead of saying or else, an influence style leadership says what else? It's about creating, growing, building, and instead of scarcity, it is a focus on abundance. And instead of looking at leadership opportunities, change opportunities as something to be protected, something to play not to lose, the game of influence is very much focused on playing to win. Now, when we think about playing not to lose and the game or the approach of playing to win, I want to invite you right now, as you think about your leadership, think about your formal positions, people who are supervising others, departments and projects, and think about the informal leadership roles that you play in your homes and in your communities. Now, as you look at the difference between a change approach to embrace change in a playing not to lose style and in a playing to win style, what is important to know that in the end, the score or the results can actually be the same. In the end, you can make the same amount of money, whether it's playing not to lose or playing to win. Yet, when you think about the score of the game, it's not only about making the money, it's also how do we leave our organizations with energy, with enthusiasm, with hope, with a focus to build for the future. So the cost of playing not to lose may be in the areas of managing people and helping them have the energy to keep moving forward. So as you're thinking about your roles as leaders and as you're thinking about how to lead change, playing to win not only can produce great results, it can produce great results with people, through people, and doing it in a way that produces energy and loyalty and hope for the future. Now, when I think about this time and I think about my own experiences with disruption, sometimes I find that when I need to help other people embrace change, sometimes I try to give people good pep talks. Now, let me just say, a pep talk is a good thing sometimes. Giving people encouragement, letting them know that things are not always going to be this hard, telling people that you see something in the future that is enthusiastic and exciting. And let me tell you, a pep talk is something that is a good way to help people embrace change. The challenge is, though, a pep talk or a positive message will only go so far as to keep people hopeful and engaged in the pursuit of getting good results. And so next, I'd like to share with you how you can think about embracing change, and as a leader, how you can engage a process, something that's predictable in helping people change with you. Now, for this part of the conversation tonight, I want you to think about something in front of you that is in the midst of disruption or change. So right now, I want you to think, perhaps it's a project, maybe it's a customer, maybe that someone has not sort of reopened their businesses, so maybe they're not engaging, or they may not be spending money yet with you. Or think about how, in some cases, you've had to reduce hours in your workforce, or maybe you've actually had to lay people off, so they had to be furloughed or had to leave the workplace for a temporary time. Or maybe other changes are maybe things are happening very, very quickly. I know in some organizations, Change is that it's too many orders, it's too much business, it's too many things to manage all at once. Whatever the change may be, I want us to think about this process and how we can be more effective as leaders by engaging this to create more predictable and positive results. So let's begin with understanding the best practices on being excellent managers of change. So first, we're going to talk about how, as leaders, we can awaken a new way of thinking. We call this awakening a breakthrough. Anytime you want people to move in a new direction, anytime you want people to embrace new information that's going to require them to change, anytime you want to capture something that's a great opportunity and it requires an urgent action, the first step in a change management process is to awaken how people think about the breakthrough that is in front of them. This is a step in change management to be very clear in your communication and to provide a context, a set of conditions in explaining to people why and how a change will be required. So I'm going to give you some ideas on how you could be awakening a breakthrough, a new way of thinking as a start to embracing and leading change. So think again for a moment. What is the change in front of you? And your first step would be to say, how do I let people know that the change is here and that why a change is going to be necessary? All right, then let's look at the second step. How then do you move your communication to communicate the vision and the excitement and the desire you have for what is coming in the future? Think of this as your sales pitch or your message, where if you want people to follow you, you have to be able to create a picture that's so appealing that people will say, where I am today is not nearly as good as where that future will be as we look ahead. So creating a vision for the future and creating it in a way where people feel a desire to go with you requires us to not only utilize our creativity in communicating that future vision, we also need to do it in a manner which is very caring. Because remember, if you've got human beings and they're operating from fear, they need to know that even though we have a vision for change, that you care very much about their feelings, their ideas, and their input. So the second step in change management is to have a focus on creating vision and creating desire. Now, the third step is all about the leadership. In order to have an effective change management process, again, we can't think of the change to do it to people. We need to be a part of the change and leading the way so that we can do change with people. And when we as leaders go first, it builds credibility and confidence that following us would be something that people would want to do. So the third step in the change management process begins with you. How are you going to show up and lead the way? How are you going to demonstrate credibility because you're willing to take the risk, to take the chance and go first? Then we look at the fourth step. And an incredibly important step in change is how do we make sure that all of our systems and all of our structure are aligned so that the change can happen? You can imagine if you're wanting to take your business in a new direction, yet all the systems and structure, all the job descriptions, all of the performance management, all of the ways you compensate and schedule people, if those things are still aligned to an old way of doing things, no matter how great your vision is, no matter how great your leadership is, it will be very difficult for people to make a change and to make a change with consistency. So again, think about the change that's in front of you and ask yourself, what is a way that I can be a great leader and lead the way? And where are there systems and structures that might be required to align so that there will be a consistency in the way we run and manage our work and our businesses? And then finally, in a change management process, we have to think about longevity and continuity. We have to ask ourselves, what are the things that we need to do to make sure that the positive change and the growth can last, to make it stick? And this is all about putting leadership in play for continuation so that we're not simply doing something and then it falls apart, or making meaningful change that has a lasting and positive impact so that we can continue to grow and develop as it relates to the future. So here are the 5 steps in a change management process, and I can say this from personal experience. These 5 steps work when you're leading a large-scale change like new product development, research and development, growing a new customer base, creating a new process in manufacturing or quality control. Change management may mean we're going to move our location, or we're going to add and hire a lot of new people, or we're going to downsize and move into a smaller office or a smaller space. All of these changes will work and follow this process. I can also say it works a lot in your families, in your communities, with your teams outside of work. I know as a mom of 3 daughters, having to manage their experience of change and how they go to school and how they interact with friends, this change management process absolutely works in the personal changes in our life as well as our work changes. So let's dig in and look at a few ideas on how you can be effective at each step of the process. So think about the change in front of you and focus on awakening a breakthrough. A few things that you can do at this stage of managing change is making sure that you are very clear and transparent and aware of what are the critical business objectives at hand. Having clarity about what is at stake is one of the more important things as a leader we can do to prepare our organizations for change, to have a breakthrough in their thinking. It's also a great idea to seek feedback. It's been often said, if a person feels like they had a chance to give their opinion or to give input, there's a very good chance that whatever happens with the change, they're more likely to embrace and to believe because they had a chance to give feedback. You also will want to make sure that you're very clear about the reason that change needs to happen and highlighting the reason change needs to happen right now. And understand that sometimes change can be uncomfortable. Even if it's a good change, we still can be uncomfortable. And so it will require us to manage the discomfort with often transparent and clear communication. So the first step in the process is to awaken a breakthrough. Next, how do we create a vision and a purpose that will ultimately create great desire? Well, I can say as leaders, there are always 5 questions. Anytime you're communicating a strategy, anytime you want people to understand the game plan, anytime you want people to get involved, to get on board, and to get going with you. So when you think about change, it's an opportunity to clearly tell people, here's where we are going, and here's why we're going there. Why is even more important than where. Third, you need to outline for people what does success look like and how will we measure it in the future. You'll also want to put some focus on how stakeholders will know what roles they are to play and how they are to engage in a positive way. And ultimately, people have a way of embracing if they understand the benefit for themselves as well as for the business. So when you think about leading change, it's about creating vision and purpose and doing it in a way that answers these 5 questions. And sometimes as leaders, it's a really good idea to actually write down the answers to these questions, to utilize that in communications, written and also verbally when you're talking with your teams and your team and your various departments. All right, the third step, how do we lead the way? Simply stated, we have to be a good role model. And we have to know that leading the way is our ability to create buy-in, to have people be excited about working in the change. Ways that we create buy-in is when we can highlight the personal benefits of the future, the professional benefits for the future, and perhaps the community benefits for the future. This comes first by leading the way as a good role model and being the person who is always looking for ways to create buy-in by helping people connect to benefits that the change will bring. All right, step 4, look at the systems and structures that you may need to examine. Sometimes they're operational and financial. Sometimes the change will require us to think about technology differently. Goodness knows, 15 months ago, I wasn't spending near this much time on video calls. And yet, as change was upon us, we had to align the systems and structures in learning how to use things like Zoom. We also need to pay attention to things like performance management. How do we measure and reward people with compensation? And how do we systems and structures will allow us to continue to keep people informed and to keep people engaged. Which leads me to the last phase, in keeping people engaged. What are things that you can be doing in order to see whatever change you're trying to create? How do you make it last? How do you make it stick? Well, a big way to make things continue is to build in systems for regular and routine feedback. At a Waking Breakthrough, if you ask for feedback at the beginning, a great way to keep people focused is to continue to ask for feedback as you're going. You also want to make sure that you're looking at not only the success metrics, but the performance indicators, things that will highlight that positive things are about to come. Certainly, we're going to look at metrics, financial metrics, operational metrics, and sometimes the human metrics, which can include things like employee satisfaction or customer satisfaction. A great way to make it stick is also to find ways to celebrate. And celebrations don't have to be big and grand. Sometimes it's just simply saying thank you to people or appreciating people for their hard work. Ultimately, making it stick is always focusing on learning. And learning sometimes does come from our mistakes or our missteps. And don't be afraid to have some fun. Sometimes the greatest way to make it stick is to add what we call whimsy. Things that are just fun ways to get excited about what's happening and to help people see how being a part of a change can be very effective. So as we think about where from here and embracing change, let me encourage us to remember we're dealing at a time where the human condition is disrupted, which means human beings are operating very much out of fear when they don't understand. We also need to remember that when we think about the human condition and how we respond to change, is that if we're not clearly giving people accurate information, they may be using their minds to fear and think the worst in things. We also need to remember that as we are communicating change, even if it's upsetting, we surely need to tell people bad news early instead of waiting and surprising, because when people are angry, that can last a whole lot longer than their temporary situation of being upset. And we've got a lot to look forward to, because when it comes to embracing change, human beings are not inherently resistant to change. What they resist is being changed and not being a part of the change process. You've also got some new definitions on how to think about leadership, how to think about the leadership styles of command or influence, how to think about playing to win versus playing not to lose, and how do we look at change as a process with defined steps that when we plan, when we focus, we can see success last for the greater benefit of our business and the greater benefit for our people. I know we're going to go into a time of Q&A. I'll make sure we make these materials available to you, so they'll be sent to you digitally. And if you ever have a question or a comment or need something, I've included my personal contact information at the end of the presentation. So with that, Tommy, I know we've got a few minutes perhaps to open it up for Q&A. I noticed that there might be some opportunities for folks to type in their questions into the chat function. So we'll open it up and begin. When it comes to embracing change and leading change, Tommy, where do we want to begin?
Well, first of all, for those who are sitting here, and if you have different questions, please either raise your hand or I'm going to open up for you to ask questions, or put it in the chat if you have some questions. Love your thoughts on it. But I am going to start with 2 questions just to get things rolling. Deb, one of the things that I have found, and I spent about 12 years building cell towers. And I have found, in terms of what you said, communication is so important, especially with clients. I have found the clients are always expecting that things will go wrong. It is never going to go perfectly. Whether it's with the Verizon wireless or AT&T Singular, I had to always not only tell them what was going on, but also provide them solutions of what I was going to do. That's what they wanted me to figure out. Is that also what you always, not only do you tell me what the problems, but you got to give them possible solutions and timelines?
Absolutely, Tommy. You know, when we think about, especially our relationships with our customers or our clients, one of the most important things we can do is manage their expectations. So if your customers are afraid or they have fear that there may be a risk or they may not get the things that they need, it is very much our responsibility to tell them the truth and make sure they understand if there are going to be things that may be a problem or a risk. And we also want to make sure that they know we're thinking through all of the possible solutions, all of the possible contingencies. And if we can communicate that to customers, even when in the midst of change, we may not know all the answers, our customers will feel more confident staying with us, not canceling, not pulling out, not leaving you, because they know that you're doing the best that you can and that you're looking out for their best interests. So absolutely, we can't simply alert them that there's a risk or a problem without also including all of the possible solutions.
Very, very good. Let me open up. Any questions? Please either raise your hand, whether it's just unmute, ask your questions. Feel free to do it in Bahasa. Willie is there to interpret or even put it in the chat box.
Hello, good morning.
Hello.
Yeah, my name is Tatik, one of the PTO merchandiser in the head office. First of all, I really thank you for this sharing and workshop. It's really useful for us. So, Deb, I have a question here. It is really great to understand that we know that embracing change is the key to get the greater success in the future. But for me, how to manage the team is also very important, because to be aligned with outside, first of all, we need to be aligned within a team, right? So actually, I try to do whatever, like the step that you have been shared. I try to do all that, but I have a challenge here, which I need to share, and maybe you can give me some more advice or tips so that I can manage my team better in the future. Like if there is an issue, I try to find out the root cause, then I try to make a cap and set the new SOP maybe for the better future. But sometimes the challenge that I'm facing is like the team sometimes not all the team align with me, because some people is not willing to change. They are trapped in the comfort zone, something like that. So they don't have they don't have any patience to grow or similar like that.
Yes.
But, the point is they are trapped in their comfort zone. So my question is there any tips or how to stimulate this kind of people so that I can embrace them to grow together. Because sometimes I giving like they come with issue, I don't give the answer, but I try to solve together with them. I ask
Yes.
them, what do you think? Something like that. I try to stimulate, but sometimes it does not work. So could you
Yes.
have maybe to share some tips and way on this?
Yes.
Thank you in advance.
Yes, I'm pleased that you asked, and I want to start by saying you are a very good leader. The things that you're describing are very positive in giving people an opportunity to participate, to give input, and to not always solve the problem, ask them to join you in working on a solution together. And yet, sometimes people don't want to change. They cross their arms, they foul, I'm not going to do it. So the first piece of advice is spending the extra time in figuring out what it is about the future that has them either afraid, what is the loss that they're perceiving, what is causing the resistance and the comfort. Because sometimes when people stay in their comfort zone, it's really because they're afraid. So comfort zones, sometimes we think, oh, they're being stubborn, or they're lazy. They don't want to do the extra work or whatever it may be. And in reality, sometimes it's because they're afraid of something. Now, it's not easy to go to someone and say, what are you afraid of? Because that may also make them feel very vulnerable. So maybe a different way of asking is to say, what do you like best about what we do today? And what do you fear will be different in the future? What things do you like right now that you will be afraid will be different in the future? And sometimes they have the wrong ideas. And so that will allow you to better understand how to get their thinking better, more accurate, because they sometimes have that idea that something's going to be hard or take more time, or they're not going to be good at it. And you can really help with managing their fears so they have a more accurate view. A second strategy, though, is when people are being a roadblock. And sometimes communicating to people the facts, letting them understand that the change is happening, giving them the clear business reasons and the timeline and the consequences if they're not able to make the change with you. I don't like to lead with consequences, but sometimes helping people understand that if they're not able to participate, if they're not able to follow the new ways or to get on board, that the consequences may mean they change a role or they change their employment altogether. We never want to lead with consequences, but I think as leaders, we have to be clear in helping people understand why and giving them the choice to either choose to play and move forward, or to recognize that the resistance that they're giving will not last and will have a consequence in the end. I think, though, doing what you're doing, seeking the input, and really asking people what it is that they fear or think the future will be like for them personally. So when you can give them the personal benefits for the change, sometimes then the resistance will go away. I hope that was helpful to you.
Hey,
Yeah,
and Deb, one thing, and we have a lot of questions, and in some sense, for me being Asian and working in the Asian context, you talked about command and influence. It is so easy, right, Deb, for a leader to say, this is what we're going to do. I am the leader. But if you want to build a team, you got to create ownership, ask questions, learn from people, get their opinions, say, hey, what do you think about this? What would you do in this situation? It creates a lot of those ownership.
Yeah, well, it does, and I think sometimes, particularly as leaders, we're human too. So I think that's important. Everything that I said about humans and our own fears, it's very hard to lead with a positive approach when we ourselves are feeling very negative, or we're feeling threatened, or we're feeling afraid. In fact, one of the questions that was in the chat highlighted that when people's livelihoods are genuinely under threat, when there is a real fear And it's not rooted in wrong thinking. It's rooted in reality. How, as leaders, do you convince people that their fundamental needs will be met as you move throughout the change process? I want to encourage us to remember that if a human being is feeling threatened at the most fundamental needs, food, clothing, shelter, safety, health, it will be very difficult for them to put their focus on growth, customers, innovation, if these things are disrupted. And so one of the ways as leaders that you can help people is to have a more accurate understanding of what is at stake, so that if there are resources available, if there are allies and other ways that you can help support or get them connected to resources, sometimes our leadership has to go outside of the norms in order to really help people and meet them where they are. Some of the best companies that I get to work with have acknowledged that people have been in real hardship. And so in some ways, there are opportunities to create temporary supports, creating avenues where people can get access to those basic needs. And in some cases, the opportunities to gain temporary situations, whether it may be a financial loan or an opportunity to have access to other supplies and things of that nature. Sometimes it's in that community level of support that people will be able to weather the livelihood challenges and know that sticking with it and staying with it will be a positive. I think a lot of the way that people will receive change is how we can be honest about our own stress and still have a positive hope for the future. Sometimes leading the way is just having a little bit more hope and a little bit more belief than the next person. It doesn't take a lot more hope and a lot more belief. It just sometimes takes a little. And when people are under distress and their livelihoods and those basic needs are under threat, they're looking for a reason to have something to look forward to. And sometimes it's in our style of communication and it's in our compassion and empathy that we can be very helpful.
Deb, let me ask you a quick question. Here's another question. How can we influence people who is more senior from us and allow them to accept new things? How do we encourage people to leave their comfort zone?
Well, I find, particularly when people are more senior, we often want to start with the big picture, and sometimes the metrics will do the talking. I find when I look to influence senior leaders, usually they have more responsibilities for things that are operational or financial. And so when we have an opportunity to communicate what we're trying to accomplish, when we speak the language of metrics, that often will get a senior leader to pay more attention, because they will see that you've been thoughtful and they see the value that this opportunity or change may create. Another thing, though, is that we need to make sure that we are honoring our senior leaders, particularly because sometimes they do have more experience. Sometimes they may have ideas and insights where we may be a bit more naive. So a great way to get a senior leader to support a change and getting them out of their comfort zone is to ask for their advice, ask for their experience, ask them to share with you how they've experienced situations like this in the past. Even though their advice or their input or their insights may not exactly fit the present circumstance, one of the highest signs of honor you can provide a senior leader is to invite their advice, to show honor, and to seek their opinions. The last thing I'll say with a senior leader is giving them an opportunity to look and to be successful. Some of the best influence that I've ever done when I was working as a head of personnel of human resources, and it was with my CEO, and I have to say he was not a strong people person, meaning he was all about the numbers, and if people had to come along, okay. He was not a strong, emotional people person. Yet I knew that the employees would absolutely be more likely to get on board with his vision if they had an opportunity to see him in a senior role caring about them as human beings. So I often had to write his messages or help write his presentations, had to make sure I was pointing out to him the various employees that were doing good things so he would know to recognize them and pat him on the back. And so sometimes the ways we have to get our senior leaders out of their comfort zones is also to help them have opportunities to be successful and to support them in showing proper leadership.
Deb, one thing that has tangibly also worked for me is because I've always been in the second chair, Deb, and I've always gone into my manager's or senior leader's office and said, I hope you know, I have the best intention to make you successful. I'm there to help you in any way. Can I just make one suggestion? If we go with this route, here are the problems that I foresee. Here's actually what I would suggest. I actually will submit to you, but I just wanted to let you know, always know I am there to reaffirm, I'm there to make it successful. 9 times out of 10, they've always said, Tommy, let's go ahead and try it. Or at times they said, hey, let's not try it there, here's why. But there became a conversation that we had.
Yeah, well, and I think sometimes as leaders, people don't always know how we're thinking. And sometimes you have to remind people that you have their best interest at heart. In fact, to gain trust in other human beings, the best definition of trust is, does the other person believe that you have their best interest at heart? And so one of the questions that I'm seeing in the chat is that sometimes change is communicated through threats or negative reinforcements. And I can understand, particularly when the change is an urgent change. We get nervous, we get scarce, we get protective, and sometimes we get negative in our communication. You have to do this or the world is going to end, our business is going to be gone. And that is not a sustainable message to getting people to get excited or to have people give you their best work. In fact, there's a lot of research that when people are engaging and they're under stress, that they're going to be anywhere from 50% to 300% less productive because they're so fearful of making a mistake, or they're so under duress that they can't use their creativity and their ingenuity, and they're not anticipating because they're in the stress mode. So some ideas, if you find that you are in the situation where either you hear yourself using negative communication or threats, or if you are in a scenario where you may be in the receiving role of hearing your leaders communicate their request with this idea, do it or else, or we're gonna, these negative consequences, a very important thing to do is to say, yes, validate those negative consequences could be true. We don't do anyone any favors when we are falsely positive. So it is important to acknowledge sometimes bad things legitimately could happen. And then we use the word and that's where influence style leadership comes in. It's, yes, these negative things could happen. And what else? What else could happen if we make this change? And so challenging ourselves to communicate a balanced approach, not to shift only to the positive and ignore the reality of the risk and negativity that may be in front of us. It's finding the and, so that we can have balance to say, this may be horrible and we may lose everything. And this may be the breakthrough that allows us to move into the next season of innovation and technology, and to gain new customer segments and to get new revenue. It may also be that. Both can be true at the same time. And so by having that balanced approach and encouraging your leaders who may be communicating to you in only the consequence or threatening mode, a way to engage them is to say, these bad things could happen, and what else, Mr. or Mrs. Leader, what else could we achieve that might be a good thing if we get on board? And sometimes the leader just hasn't thought it through. So you're giving them an opportunity to articulate the vision and the desire and the purpose that may also guide people to get excited about the change.
Deb, I know that time is running out. There's two more questions. Actually, if you don't mind, I actually will find the time to record those answers to those two questions when you and I are free, and I'll send it to Mandeep and the rest of the team. Is that okay with you,
Well,
Deb?
surely, and I'll tell you what, Tommy, if you'd like me to spend it, if it's just two more, I can extend the time
Yeah.
a little bit now. So why don't we'll finish it up now, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, great. So it says that so the change is a process, not a one-day program. There should be a program to see change is monitored. We need time spent. Let's do the routine to spend time to launch, keep program running. So I'm saying, okay, great. So let me say this. Yes. So change isn't just the thing that you try to fit into your day job. I think sometimes we have our real work and we have our change work. Maybe some of you have experienced this. For a period of time, you have all the things that you're responsible for doing. And then in parallel, you have all the things that we need to focus on for change. So by having a process and by looking at the change work where it follows something that's predictable, where we are allocating time and where we are understanding the ways that we can quickly merge the day work with the change work, the faster we can merge those two things, so it just becomes the way we work, the new way, you will begin to see the change management process take effect more quickly. So the way that you get the real work and the change work to come together is following those 5 steps. Because if you're awakening a breakthrough, you're creating vision and desire, you're putting your attention on what do I need to do to show leadership, to get people to buy in, to get on board. How do I think about the systems and structures that are here? How do we organize and prioritize those structures that need to be realigned? And then how do we focus on our scorecard and our feedback? When we follow that prescribed process, it can help things come together more quickly. And in some cases, in your organizations, you may also do well to have someone step away from their day-to-day responsibilities so that they have more capacity and time to focus on the change itself. And we want to do that within a prescribed time frame and within a prescribed set of metrics. Because if someone is no longer doing the work during the day, that usually means other people on the team are now doing more work in the day to have that cover. So you want to have a really solid and disciplined process and not just kind of run your change efforts and just hope that it all works out. That's never efficient. In fact, sadly, it often doesn't work. I also saw this one last question from me, as leadership is also about how leaders create other leaders, and how could we explain how to measure whether we are already successful in it. So I'm going to look for maybe a little bit more context about.
It looks like, Deb, it says, how do we know that we are successful in creating other leaders?
How do we know that we're successful in creating other leaders? Okay, well, I like to think of this both, well, there's the objective evidence. So we know that we have been successful in leaders when we're observing the people around us take initiative, take responsibility, that they're meeting deadlines without you having to nag or remind them all the time. You know that you see leaders when you see enthusiasm and excitement and passion. You know you're doing a job in creating leaders when you seek feedback and ask those that are reporting to you how they feel about the progress they're making and how they're evaluating success. You also will seek feedback from other stakeholders who are observing the behavior of the people that you're developing to become leaders. I think another great sign of leadership is when a person takes real ownership and begins to create ideas for things not only where they are today, but they start looking into the future. A good sign that you have a leader on your team and that they're moving into the mindset of a leader, it's when they have the ability to see not only what is being asked of them, but they're looking out ahead. In fact, sometimes when they're really good at the task in front of them, they might be a good manager, which is an effective step on their way to becoming good leaders. But often the great sign of leadership is when people who are working for you have an ability to see things in the future and they're able to articulate them and offer them. I think one other final thought is you know that you've grown a leader when the people who are in positions of leadership show a willingness to accept the pain and the stress and the sadness and the empathy and the compassion for people. I think a great sign of leadership is when they become a leader, not only in getting the work done, but they do it in a way where they care very deeply about the people that they're leading and how those people are flourishing. You know, leaders are leaders when they're helping other people flourish. I think is maybe a good way to answer that.
Deb, thank you very much. Mandeep, any last thoughts? And other than that, we're done. Thank you so much, everyone, for allowing us to speak. I know all of you have to get back to work. It has been a pleasure serving you. It continues to be an honor just getting to know you. And Deb, thank you for your time. And Mandeep, I'm going to turn it over to you, my dear friend.
Thanks, Tommy. Thanks, Deb. I think I had a wonderful time listening to you. I'm sure everybody else would have the same opinion. I think I mean, it's very good to see people's involvement now in our, first seminar a couple of months ago. The kind of questions or the number of questions, and now what I'm seeing people are asking. Maybe it's you, Deb. You made a lot of influence. People are asking a lot of questions now. I mean, it's good to see. Only two things I would like to add. First is that the previous seminar was on employee engagement. So I think just to answer to Ibu series questions, that if there are a few people in the team, you need to assess how much they are engaged. That is very important. Once you have an engaged employee, then you can implement these suggestions of embracing change. It will be perfect to have it. Just only one thing, I think I understand that the quality of leadership is something very important to implement this whole change management process. So my simple question is that there is one style which is command, there is another style which is influence. How do we assess that? Suppose, I mean, first thing I have so we have say 20 leaders in the room. I really want to understand which one is having a command style and which one is using an influence style. So not now, but what we will do, I think we just need to make some kind of a checklist which can help us in understanding. By we can give it to a leader, or maybe we can give it to the subordinates, and we can ask their feedback about their leader, so that we know, okay, out of 10 there are 7 people who work with a command style. So we want to convert them from a command to influence style. And I believe that if a majority of the leaders are in an influence style, I think embracing change would be much more easy.
Absolutely. I will add this, that the command style usually works best when you're in a sinking ship and everyone needs to get into a lifeboat very quickly. It's at that stage where you're telling people what they want to do. It's not asking people, would you like to row? Would you like to bail water? The command style in that urgent situation may be appropriate. Otherwise, you're exactly right. If we can shift from the command style to the influence style, the embracing change will be in front of you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Deb. Topic is so interesting. I wish we could have some more time to listen, listening to you.
Well, I'd love to come back. So anytime, would love to come back. It's great being with all of you. Have a great morning and getting ready to lead into what I hope is a good weekend as well.
Right. So on behalf of
Thank you so much, Deb.
Yeah. On behalf of Busana team, I appreciate your time, Deb, and CLC's efforts for giving us so valuable insight. Look forward to the next seminar. I'll just request Miss Marisa if she wants to say
yes.
some words.
No, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Deb. It was so interesting, and I think relevant to all of us, including myself. And thank you, Tommy, again for organizing, and thank you everybody for your really great questions. I think it's very insightful, and just really appreciate the thoughtful engagement that we've had today. So thank you again, everybody.
Bye, everyone.